So we're going to take a little bit of a detour today. Um, Thank you for joining us for our drop-in self-care day. We've been doing some activities. We've had a workshop or a workout already. We've done some centering techniques. And now we're going to shift into something else. We're going to do an alcohol mindset shift with Margot Burns of Margot Burns Coaching. And Margot, welcome. And I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing this. What a fabulous opportunity for people and just to refocus on their self-care and pay attention to themselves. We just tend to not do that as much. We're so good at taking care of everybody else in our lives, and how wonderful to have a day just for ourselves. So thanks for doing this, Denise.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
I I am Margot Burns. I have a coaching practice here in Denver, Colorado, but I am have national or clients all over the nation. And today I want to talk about gray area drinking. And some of you might be scratching your head already, like, well, what's gray area drinking? And I'm going to tell you. So gray area drinking is the space between, there's people in the world that that really alcohol is just not a big deal for them. They might have a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year, or a special celebration, and then it's that they just don't think about it. And then there's people who are really on this substance abuse end of the spectrum, that drinking is such a problem in their life that they have had maybe legal problems, lost relationships, and need a substance abuse program or a really intense medically supervised program. And then there's this huge space in between called gray area drinking. And that's what I want to talk about. And that's where I specialize. I work primarily with women, but the kind of coaching I do can be applied to anyone who thinks that they're drinking too much. So this is really some of these questions that I'll have you ask yourself are really pretty personal. And, like, do you think you're drinking too much? Do you worry about how much you're drinking? Do you wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm never drinking like that again? Or maybe I'm just never drinking that, period. And then at 5 o'clock at night, you find yourself in the liquor store with a bottle of wine in your hand, or you are cooking dinner and you open a bottle of wine and pretty soon it's gone. And so those are the kinds of questions to ask yourself, like, is it creating this cycle that you don't seem to be able to get out of? And that drinking the way you're drinking maybe isn't that healthy, or you're just questioning it. A lot of people that fall in this category of gray area drinkers, again, there's this continuum. Like, sometimes it's just, well, I drink when I go out with my girlfriends, and I drink when, there's a party in someone's backyard, or I drink when there's something to celebrate, or I drink when I'm stressed and I've had a long day and I just need to take the edge off. Could be any of those things or all of those things. And what starts to happen is that people are like, I'm drinking almost every night of the week, or I'm noticing that it's hard for me to control my anxiety without a glass of wine or two. And that was certainly my story. I noticed I get really revved up. I'm a kind of high strung, anxious person anyway. And I was drinking to control my anxiety. But for anybody who's ever consumed alcohol on a regular basis, that doesn't work. It lasts for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that kind of like, because we get a big dopamine hit when we drink alcohol. And then our body starts to seek going back into equilibrium. And pretty soon we start feeling anxious all over again. So alcohol is actually an irritant to our body. It doesn't relax us at all, just momentarily, maybe. So anyway, there's this whole cycle. And that's what I work with when I have clients who come to me for gray area drinking. And so it's really the mindset shift I want to talk about today, is to really just get people thinking about it. Because if you think you have a problem with drinking, then you do. I mean, that's really it. It doesn't matter what your friends think. It doesn't matter what your husband or wife thinks, or your partner. If you think it's a problem, then it is. So I know that you stopped drinking. And I think you said, what, 9 years ago or something like this, which is an amazing accomplishment. And I wondered if you were, would talk about that and just say, since this is a self-care day, how did it impact your ability to really take care of yourself? What did you notice?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. It everything else just goes out the window. It doesn't really matter. I was a highly functional alcoholic. I had, I didn't lose any of the things that are associated with alcoholism, losing your job, losing your house, losing your marriage, things like that. I didn't lose any of that.
Mhm.
Um, but I did lose my self-respect. I and my self-esteem and everything that goes into it. And quite frankly, I just didn't even like who I was. And I think that's one of the reasons why I kept drinking. And although if you had asked me at the time, I would have been, are you kidding? No, I'm one of the most confident people you could possibly imagine. What are you talking about? But everything else goes out the window. You really don't care, about maintaining your own health. And, I did yoga while I was drinking.
Mhm.
I did exercise while I was drinking, but it was just because, I don't know, I felt that I needed to. And it wasn't really until I came to the realization one day that it needed to stop. And it was a long process in that I was checking out AA for many months before I actually walked into the rooms. But it was an event that was triggered where I just thoroughly embarrassed myself, even though nobody at that event that I was at said anything to me.
Mhm.
I was mortified. And that's what it took me to say, just go to the rooms, go to AA and get some help. And I've been fortunate in that I have not taken a drink since. And so, hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
It does. And thank you so much for sharing and being so willing to be open and honest with everyone, because your story, and it's very similar to my story, is so common. Like, this is gray area drinking. And whether people identify as an alcoholic or not, it's that other piece that you talked about, the high functioning, like, I'm on it, I'm killing it at work, I'm getting it done, I'm taking care of my kids, I'm doing everything I need to do. But a lot of times I would feel like I was slogging through the day. I had too much to drink the night before. And and like you, I woke up, I had an incident where I was coaching someone and I had had alcohol wine the night before. And it was an early morning call and I was still tipsy. Like, I was like, holy cow, I can't think of what I want to say next. And I talk for a living, and I have to be think on my feet and talk, and that freaked me out. And I stopped drinking. Now, I used a coach. I got help from a coach. You got help from AA. There's so many different ways to get support if you find you're falling into this camp. Some people just want to take a break for 30 days. Like, I have a dry January program going on right now, and for some people that's enough. For some people, they want to take 3 months off or a year off, and then they just find that they want to quit for good. And so, but yeah, that's gray area drinking. High functioning, highly successful. On the outside, it's people that look like they have everything going on. There's no DUI. There's no, like, getting written up at work. It's usually there's no crash, and so it's hard. It's almost harder to stop to see the problem. Um, so thanks for sharing that. So the mindset shift is really about taking the judgment out of it, taking the blame out of it, taking the shame out of it, because really, and of course, 15 or 20 minutes is not enough to go into this full thing, but alcohol has creates a physiological response in our bodies, and it means that we have less control. So the more we're putting alcohol in our body, the more we're essentially training our brain that we need it. And so it really takes a dedicated break from alcohol, just like anything else, a break from sugar, a break from whatever other kind of substance you're putting in your body. And so that's the way that I do the coaching. But the mindset shift I want to talk about today is just this acceptance that if if you're out there and you're listening and you feel like I'm drinking too much, this is a problem for me, and what's wrong with me, or why can't I get a hold of this? I know better. No, that's the message that I really want everyone to change right now. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, there's probably a list of pages long of what's right with you. And it's not, you're working against your own survival instincts when you're trying to quit drinking and your own physiology. And it's hard. It's hard to change habits. It's hard to stop drinking. And so the way that I coach and I work with people on this is through self-compassion, self-awareness. I use a system called the Enneagram, which I know you're familiar with, that is really about, and of course, I told you earlier, I could talk for 20 hours about the Enneagram, of course, right? But it's a system of 9 different ways of viewing the world and having the self-understanding that is so powerful and so transformational. And that's what it takes to create long-lasting change. It takes self-awareness. It takes understanding and taking self-responsibility or emotional responsibility. So, yeah, I just wondered if you could talk about the Enneagram. I know that you come from a type 3, and just say a little bit about what that wisdom or what that knowledge has helped you understand. And if you want me to explain a little about type 3, I can do that, or have you just say a little.
Let's start there.
Okay.
What is a type 3?
So a type 3, again, there's 9 different types. Type 3 is one of the what's called a heart center type, right? So it's heart center types really want to connect and want to be in the world in a way in which they have strong relationships and connections. And type 3 has an image of success. So the type 3 wants to be seen as someone who is successful and has a lot of accomplishment. And they are successful and have a lot of accomplishment. I mean, this is what they don't just project this image, they usually are this way in the world. And you know, the gift of the 3 is that they are very very task oriented, very driven, I mean, they just get it done, you know. So we need 3s in our world, and this is a very type 3 country, you know, very type 3 culture, and that behavior is rewarded. So but 3s really teach us about this sensitivity to ourselves and who we want to be in the world. And of course, all of our gifts can go into overdrive, right? So the type 3 tends to overwork, overdo.
Not at all.
You're laughing, right? Usually when people start laughing, it's like, oh yeah, you're onto something there. And this overcommitting and forgetting yourself, right? For being so busy doing that you're missing the moment right in front of you.
You know, it's spot on, but what would it mean when somebody once told me that I'm a 3 leaning to a 2?
Yeah. So I don't have the diagram here, but so there's the points are arranged on a circle, and the points on either side of you are called a wing. And type 2 is a wing to type 3. So a type 3 with a 2 wing will tend to have more of an altruistic side. Type 2 is the helper, it's the giver, it's the so a type 3 with a 2 wing will be very service oriented, you know, wanting, I mean, so what you're doing in the world is a perfect perfect creation for you, you know, perfect occupation for you, because you're out in the world, you're making stuff happen, but you're doing good in the world. You're providing a service and you're providing something that's meaningful.
See, that's where I find the value in the Enneagram. And just to let you know, we have about 5 minutes left for this conversation. But that's what I find valuable, because I find it as a confirmation that I do some of the things that I do, even though it may drive everybody in my family crazy, because that's my type. It's just my nature. It's who I am. And Can we talk about the struggles of trying to be something that you're not?
And well, you tell me, I mean, what is it like to have to sustain this image of someone who's successful and just on it all the time?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm going to tell you that I don't have an answer for it. It is who I am. This is just me. I'm not pretending to be a three.
Mhm.
I'm not pretending to be something that I'm not. It's just ingrained in me. And it's like me asking you, you know, what is it like to sustain who you are? You can't. It's just about who you are. So there's literally no thought to it whatsoever. Let me turn my timer off there.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and that's what I think I find the most fascinating about the Enneagram is for me, it's an acceptance that oh, you're not like me. I'm not going to get angry because you're not like me. What do you mean you're not focused? Why don't you understand the importance of this? Why aren't,
Yeah.
you are who you are.
Yeah. And right there, you've really nailed a really critical part of the Enneagram and why it's so important, why I use it with people who are trying to break a habit like drinking too much, right? So it's this compassion. It's this way of having a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. And so there's more compassion. So instead of being really impatient or getting angry with someone because they're not handling something or they're not dealing with it the way you would,
Mhm.
like, oh, they have a different way of approaching this. My
Right.
way is not the only way. And for threes and for many type, it's not saying, oh, well, this is who I am, and therefore, I just have to deal with it. It's more like, oh, this is my instinctual behavior. This is my go-to, and I have to be aware of it. I have to
Mhm.
watch for it. I have to be mindful of it so that, because we all have these really predictable patterns.
Right.
And instead of saying, God, you're so stupid. Why did you do that again? It's more like, oh, of course I'm doing that again. Interesting. Now let's pause and see now what direction do I want to go from a more intentional place? You know, how can I be more
Absolutely. Thank you
intentional?
for saying that because that is, I think, really critical for people to see. Where I said, this is me, this is who I am. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I can't change and learn new behaviors and
Yeah.
how I react to things. And hopefully, I have done well with that since I stopped drinking, is just to have more of that compassion and help um, me deal with other personality types. I will tell you, there's still some I don't do well with.
Right. Yeah. And again, you can say, oh, interesting. Like, what is it about this person that's bringing up something in me?
Right.
Because this is all, and I say this a lot, but it's an inside job. What I mean by that is really the only thing we can look at is our own stuff, our own behavior, our own reactivity. And that's emotional responsibility. That's taking ownership of who we are. We hear a lot, and I'm sure you've heard this too. Well, if you would change, if you would just do this, I would feel better. Well, that's not the way that personal growth works.
No.
So the
So
Enneagram has been just this transformational tool that I've
so
found.
let's wrap it up with some final
Okay.
thoughts then.
Well, so really the biggest message that I want to have today is that when you understand yourself and what makes you tick, you have the power to make any change you want. And that's where the Enneagram comes in, and that's where coaching for gray area drinking comes in. It's this pausing, slowing down enough to take care of yourself, which is the focus of today, right? And really looking at, okay, what are my patterns? Where am I having trouble? But more importantly, what's really working for me? What's working, and how can I move into this new way of thinking about drinking or my approach to drinking that comes from a place of compassion and non-judgment?